So in case you somehow missed the news, today is Delphi's birthday, 25 years old. Came out February 14th, 1995. Some of the festivities we're going to have, or that you may or may not be aware of, if you go to delphi.embarcadero.com, we have a whole lot of content on there celebrating Delphi's birthday, anniversary, the history, and such. Of course, learndelphi.org is a place you go to as we're teaching the next generation of developers. So you can go there, contribute, and be part of that. And then what we're going to have, actually, most of this webinar is an interview with Anders and Chuck, which you may know as the co-architects of Delphi. Also, we have Delphi One client server is going to be available for free, probably before the webinar is over. You can find that information on that on delphi.embarcadero.com, or I'll provide a link as well. And we have a collection of MVP stories, or Delphi stories by MVPs and other members of the community. And people have been sharing pictures of their Delphi bookshelves on Facebook and other communities. I actually want to show some of these off here. Particularly like this one, Delphi gave me money, job, and wife. That's just awesome. That's exciting to see everybody sharing some of the neat stuff they have going on here with some Turbo Pascal disks. Actually, I have that's not, it was written with Turbo Pascal. I do have a Turbo Pascal 1 floppy disk at home someplace as well, so that's exciting. So there's a lot of these online. If you go to Facebook or other places, other communities, I'm sure you'll find some more as well. And then this was by one of the MVPs. It's kind of hard to see because of the angle, but that is the Delphi helmet logo on the beach in Brazil, 25 years. And with that, let's go ahead and jump into our interviews here. This is a super treat with the superstars of Delphi. Oh, hey, I see Chuck now.
Hey, this is Anders.
Hey, Anders. Hello.
I don't know, is my camera on?
Mine is now. Can everybody see how handsome I am?
There we go. There we go. Ah.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are.
Awesome. Hey, Chuck, good to see you.
Should have done that. Oh, hey.
Oh.
Oh. I like the glasses, Anders. Those are cool.
Oh, thank you. I need glasses when I'm coding now. It's like.
Who are you people?
I have a separate pair of glasses I wear when I'm coding versus when I'm away from my computer.
Yeah, me too.
So everybody has glasses except for David. What's up with that,
he's
David?
the young one.
Exactly. I actually do have glasses. I just wear contacts.
Very good. So Jim, are we recording just the recording of this, or are we going to record all this video as well, or?
Yeah, let's record all the video as well, if that's okay with everybody.
Sure.
It's nice to see everybody. So I was going to share some slides and stuff, but my computer keeps locking up, and so I'm not going to touch it anymore. I'm not sure if I'm still streaming video or not, actually, at this point.
We can see you now.
Yeah, we can see you now.
Hello.
Nice beard. Your beard game is strong, Jim.
Yeah, thanks. You know, I didn't even realize it until someone pointed out after the fact that now I'm got a David I beard going on. And it's like, oh yeah.
All you need now is a tie-dye shirt.
The territory.
Yeah, tie-dye shirt. Yeah, that'd be great. So kind of what I wanted to do here is just kind of talk about I was not at the original Delphi launch event, and I know all of you were, except I guess David wasn't, but just to kind of talk about the reaction and everything that happened at the original Delphi launch event, right? And why, or what it was that made Delphi so innovative and so amazing. And then go on to talk about how you know, Delphi, we've built on that foundation to make Delphi what it is today.
I mean, I'll go.
Yeah, all right.
If you like.
No one better to start us off.
I dug through my old files and I found the talk script and the demo script and all the demos from the original launch. I still have them sitting around in an old zip file.
Wow.
So, but it was fun. It was on Valentine's Day. I remember February 14th. You know, if you couldn't get a date, you could always go to the Delphi launch. And I think we had quite a few people there. I forget how big it was, but it was like 700 or something like that, as I recall.
The place was packed, standing room only.
Yeah, it was Moscone Center. And
people brought their dates, so that was
yeah, well, I brought my date, which was my now wife. I do remember. I mean, the demo was. I mean, it was, you know, with today's eyes, pretty simple stuff, but you know, showing you know, visual application development with a real compiler and an object-oriented language behind it, and the ability to extend the tool in itself, which, you know, at the time the competition couldn't do. We also demoed exception handling. I remember like doing a dereferencing a null pointer and your app kept running, which like floored a bunch of people.
Yeah, people freaked out over that.
Yeah.
It seems like I remember that it was common that if not only would your app stop running, but you could crash the entire Windows 3.1 OS.
You could take the entire OS down. I mean, yeah, it was there was before there was you know, user and kernel mode or anything like that. I mean, so yeah. GP faults were bad.
GP faults, yeah. I haven't heard that phrase in a while. My memory of it was just the unbelievable excitement at the booth. I remember Zach Erlacher giving demos to standing room only crowds at the booth with 3, 4, 5, 6 layers deep around the back of the seats.
Yeah.
I remember Borland promised a sort of a pre-release copy, and they had to call in security to manage the people waiting at the door to get into the Moscone Center for the pre-release copy. It was very exciting. I remember it.
It was exciting.
So now I know Delphi 1 had the data aware controls. Did it have the design time data that we still have?
Oh yeah.
Set to Delphi?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. And you know, the whole data aware control, it was sort of interesting because originally I remember Chuck and I, we just wanted to build and Gary, you know, I think too, we just wanted to build a competitor to Visual Basic, right? I mean, we weren't really necessarily thinking all that much about the marketing angle, but Zach Erlacher was very, I thought, very insightful, you know, in retrospect, that we, you know, in order for this to really be a viable product, we need to appeal to at that time, you know, the enterprise was doing client server, and we need to define ourselves as a client server product and compete with Power Builder and you know, the other sort of database 4GLs that were out there. And we actually, I remember I think we delayed the launch by as much as 9 months in order to really build a solid set of database and data access controls, such that we could launch on day one as a client server product. And in retrospect, that was the right thing to do. But
What's that, Chuck?
Well, I just remember the meeting that we had with you, me, Gary, and Tanj in Gary's living room, talking about how the database controls should be designed, and you know, the fact that we were going to delay at least 6 months to get the database controls in before we launched. We were pretty much ready. I mean, I think Delphi was a much better product in 1.0 because we did that delay, because we could actually work on things. I remember the DFM file format was really, really new when we did the database stuff, and we ended up being able to polish our serialization format. The form designer was a lot better. But yeah, we delayed quite a long time for to get the database stuff.
I certainly remember getting in there and rewriting some of I think the data grid, I did a bunch of rewriting on.
Yeah. Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
I had used Turbo Pascal, and I even used I guess it was Borland Pascal for Windows a little bit. And
Mhm.
Delphi felt like a light year leap forward from anything I'd previously used. It completely blew me away.
That's because it was.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why all the excitement came from that. And Marco, you shared an old article that Anders, you wrote about the goals of Delphi and why you guys did what you did. And those goals are still applicable today. It's why it's
Mhm.
still valuable. It's what attracts developers to the product. I remember, Chuck, you've given the example before of you guys drew on the whiteboard, button one dot caption equals and a string. And today we think nothing of that. But back in the days of the object window library and, Turbo Pascal for Windows and all of that, I mean, it was a bear to write a Windows app. Even
Oh
in
yeah, you
Turbo
have to get
Pascal,
the
let
pencil
alone,
book
C++.
and grovel around in H-Winds and WM Pinks and
Exactly.
yeah, it was
So
horrible.
the simplicity of it, and to encapsulate so much complexity without sacrificing the native compiling, the performance, and everything else. I mean, it was truly revolutionary.
One of the stories I tell about, when we're developing the VCL was when I was frustrated with the edit control because it was a mess. The edit control in Windows the API really is terrible to work with, and I was trying to make it sane, and I was just complaining to Anders about how tough this really was, and he goes, "Well, if it was done right, we wouldn't have a job." So
That's right. This is a challenge and an opportunity, right?
yeah. So it's like I went back to my office, like, I guess I better do my job then.
Yeah.
Well, but that's a great point because to me, one of the most important facets of Delphi was the component model, was the fact that Delphi itself was built on a framework that you could extend as a developer. And that's, I saw that, and I got the opportunity to get really early involved into Delphi and started writing about it, investigating it. I was like everybody here, we've been digging up our old notes. I found an old email that I sent to Jeff after I had started writing the Blazing Pascal column. And I'd gotten a pre-release of Delphi, and they said, the object model and component model have me salivating. We have to talk. And that was what led to all the other stuff that I was able to get involved with. But it was truly just amazing to be able to build something, reuse it, and actually, for me personally, it was to market it. It became a third-party avenue to build reusable tools that other people could use.
The first thing I did when I got it was build T-Smiley. So the rest is history. It's all downhill from there.
A classic.
Yeah.
Still compiles and runs today, by the way. Same code.
That's amazing. Was the idea to have the source code for the VCL and RTL included with Delphi, was that a pretty revolutionary idea? I mean, now it seems like a huge benefit, but.
Well, we had the RTL was actually always available for Turbo Pascal. That was one of the things that we've always had available was, just about anything that went into your application, we would provide the source code for. It was a separate product for Turbo Pascal. We decided to say for Delphi, it just you got it with the product instead of having a separate product. But we always, that was one of the things that was different about programming at Borland, is because even very early, it was very rare for people to see the actual code that you wrote. And every day I was writing code knowing that our customers were going to be looking over my shoulder at some point. So it was a different way to write the code. And I was, we probably could have used a few more comments, but we were actually very careful about what we wrote.
Isn't there a comment stripper?
Well, we didn't need one. Yeah.
There is one now.
That's true.
But having that source was invaluable to anybody wanting to learn how the system worked. You know, if you wanted to spend the time and go through, you could figure out how everything was done. And again, that was another, you know, revolutionary idea that you didn't find in other, you know, areas in development.
Yeah, that's true. And in fact, when 2 years ago we did the Delphi Community Edition, I mean, some of the managers were a bit skeptical. I mean, why do we need source code? I mean, well, if we want young new students to look at this product and learn how it works, it has to come with source code. And in fact, Community Edition, which is the free sibling, has full source code, because that's how you debug into it, learn about it, read about it, and get and learn programming after all. So yeah, the source is really.
So Anders, what would you say was the most challenging thing for you to do with regard to producing Delphi?
Well, I think a couple of things maybe. Some of the two-way editing of code and having, you know, a fault-tolerant parser and the ability to inject code and then keeping this whole two-way game in sync at all times, you know, was definitely novel and not easy to. I mean, you could get it to work, but getting it to work always and getting it to work when your source code is broken, which of course it is when you're in the middle of editing it, and still having the two-way tools work, that was definitely an interesting challenge. We already mentioned, you know, like getting all of the controls written and just working around all of the absurd issues in Windows that just over and over, you know, I mean, there's so many inconsistencies in how the native controls worked and you know, like getting that to work correctly, getting the database controls to work correctly. And then in parallel, you know, we were building a 32-bit compiler. So Peter Solich was working on the compiler core for that, and you know, like managing to ship a 16-bit product and meanwhile making sure that we're not going to immediately break you in the 32-bit product, which shipped I think about a year later. That definitely that was a challenge too, and then switching everything to the 32-bit product. So but there are plenty of things to sink your teeth into.
How about you,
We spent
Chuck?
a lot of time with mapping the records for message maps and making sure that we had the advantage at the time. We had pre-release versions of the 32-bit compiler before we shipped the 16-bit compiler, and so we could verify that a lot of it worked before we even shipped 16-bit. And I remember FleetCon like cornering me in the cafeteria at one point, trying to convince me to delay until the 32-bit compiler was done, and I thought he was crazy. We already waited long enough, but I just remember just getting a lot of pressure at the time to get the 32-bit version done. I felt that Delphi wouldn't really have legs until the 32-bit version came out, and that I believe was true.
Yeah.
But as soon as it did, it was just it really took off.
Yeah. And of course, it was interesting because the backdrop for us working on Delphi was actually, you know, well, so Chuck and I worked together on Turbo Pascal for years and years, but then there was this whole shift to GUIs, and there was, you know, this whole also shift towards software ICs and the ability to build components and wire them together. And we had this project called Monet. I don't know if you remember that, Chuck.
Oh yeah, definitely.
For about, I think we worked on that for about a year and a half, which was sort of the ability to construct applications purely by visually wiring together components with, you know, so components had inputs and outputs, and you could, like, as Gary joked at one point, you know, we completely cornered the market for Fahrenheit to centigrade converters, you know, because you could you could drop down like an edit box and a button and an adder and a multiplier and a constant 1.8 and whatever, and just get it all to But in reality, it did not scale at all. And you know, once your app like got even just a little bit complex, it was nothing but lines going from everywhere to everywhere, and then you had to have like sort of containers that could aggregate all your lines, and it was a mess.
From that, we got the method pointer though.
Sure. Yes. No. The ability to wire, you know, an event and a handler together with a bound method pointer, right? Function pointer and context, right? That was definitely valuable. But in a sense, we were sort of energized by getting back to the real world and working on real code again. And I think that was part of what was so fun about Delphi. It was like finally, you know, here's like a rejuvenation of all of the work that we had already put into Turbo Pascal and Borland Pascal, because I mean there's a strong lineage there, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, the comment you guys made, that's fascinating about the origins of the method pointer, because having cut my teeth on TurboVision and all of that, even going back to DOS with Turbo Pascal and so forth, you know, if you wanted to do any custom behavior for a button, you ended up creating a descendant of a button. You know, it was like kind of crazy what we needed to do to get that to work. But the delegation that you guys created via the method pointer was brilliant. I mean, talk about something we take for granted today in any modern platform. But this was, again, like so enlightening. It's like, wow, this is a new way to think about software. And I think that's, if any one piece to take away from all of that, how has Delphi changed it? It's changed the way people thought about constructing software, because it wasn't just the canonical object-oriented work. It was everything that went with it. You know, it's to be able to delegate, to separate your UI from your rules and get access to the data layer and make it fast. So totally thrilled.
To this day, still.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, we would write things on the board that we wanted to work. We weren't sure exactly how we were going to get to work, but we said, you know, we write something like the button.caption and the button.onClick, and we said, well, how are we going to get this to work? And then we just kind of said, okay, well, we probably need a property, something that we can intercept the writes to. And so we came up with this concept of, okay, you just write a property and you do the read and write, and we would see how far that takes us. And then we said, oh, well, we need to, later we decided that we could use that for serialization too. We didn't have to actually write custom serializers. We could just say, okay, well, we can get a list of the properties and just write their values because we can get them. And so we went with this, trying to leverage the things that we'd come up with and be minimalistic about what we added. And we even removed things like you didn't have to do the hat symbol anymore to dereference a pointer because that was getting in the way. And we tried to make sure that memory management wasn't a big deal. We talked about garbage collection, but Anders was convinced we wouldn't be able to get it done in time. So we decided to do with this ownership model to simplify the memory management. So you just created a form, and to get rid of everything in it, you just say, well, dispose the form, and it takes care of all of it.
But I mean, for the time, in retrospect, not doing garbage collection, I think, was right, because even to this day, you know, fully garbage collected and memory safe systems, you know, are wonderful for productivity, but they are very tricky for interoperability when you're talking to a non-GC'd underlying OS and component model, because you have to have sort of all of these like marshalling in and out of the safe memory arena, and then, you know, it adds a lot of complexity. You know, by keeping it simple, we stayed, you know, I mean, we were as expressive as C++, but, you know, as easy to use as Visual Basic, right? I mean, and that was tremendously powerful.
And also, yeah, to the point, we could just call the OS. I mean, for any time we wanted to do it, we could just, you just included Windows, you know, so uses Windows and start calling Windows. Yeah. So that's one of the philosophies we had, was to make sure that we knew we were going to be able to cover everything. We knew that the set of components we were going to be was going to be probably the set of components you would use 90% of the time. There's always that 10% that makes your app special that we knew that we couldn't do. And so what we wanted to make sure is that you could write those components yourself, and that you could call the operating system to do it. And so we would expose things that weren't exposed traditionally, like you could grab the handle out of a Windows control and then start calling Windows calls on it, and we would adjust. We would react to that, knowing you did it, and then take special precautions about allowing you to do stuff like that. Taking the handle out of a canvas, which was a DC, and being able to call any method you wanted, because we would realize you got the handle, and so we would forget about the assignments that we had done to it. And when you call our method again, we would reestablish our context before we'd use the DC.
I remember we
made
talked
these
about
allowances to make sure that you could write the controls you needed for your application.
Yeah, I remember us talking about that as the escape hatch. There was always an escape hatch to the underlying OS. So if the component didn't do a particular thing that you wanted it to do, then you could just grab the HWind and then go at it.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that that model that you are describing and you built, we've been able to go through it and extend it throughout, I mean, platforms and technologies. But the model is the same. I mean, today you can have a reference to an Objective-C object on iOS or a Java object on Android. And it's the same foundation. We still wrap the components. You can still call APIs that are not C APIs. Maybe they're Java APIs. They're Objective-C APIs. They're Linux APIs, whatever. I mean, so across platforms, the same model and the same approach survived, 25 years and is still working. And on Windows, we got from API to COM, and now we call WinRT APIs. WinRT APIs, that's interesting because the tables are the same of COM, so they're same of interfaces since Delphi 2. I mean, it hasn't changed. I mean, with same exact D-table model of Delphi 2, we can call into WinRT APIs natively, and which is quite fun. And the product was really very well thought out, because again, otherwise we wouldn't be able to take that code and the underlying foundation and bring them over to a world that has changed. Because if you look at Windows today, but if you look at the other platforms today, the difference is striking. But we still have compilers, we still have components, we still have APIs that we surface and allow you to call into for the extra code that we don't provide.
Yeah, the cool thing about, just to add on to that, is it's the three pillars of Delphi since the launch. You had the language and component model, you had the VCL that was the implementation of the component model, and it was very well designed. It had all of it wasn't just that the model gave you the ability to write properties and events and all of that. It was here we had a real working implementation of that, following all of the great design that you wanted. Don't leave your object or your component in an invalid state. That was applied in the development of all of that. And then you had an IDE that was robust enough to host all of that. And those three pillars are still core to what
the main thing,
not only Delphi, but everybody else wants to follow.
The design is that I remember when we did OWL, Object Windows Library, we had, I would say, 8 different states an object could be in. The constructed, the pre-initialized, the initialized, the window handles now available, and all of these different states was difficult to describe to the user what states the object could be in and what you could do when. Because there's certain things in Windows you can only do when you change the window class. Certain things you can only do once you have a window handle. And what we wanted to do with the component library is to say, when you have a button, you have a button. And if it has to recreate its window handle and recreate its class to allow you to set something like a border, then we just go ahead and did it for you. We didn't expose those states. We just internally did the work necessary to make it so that you felt like when you had a button, you had the button. You're not talking to something that talks to the button. You do have the button. And that was different from a lot of the libraries at the time, where they were trying to do this remote control of a surface. We wanted to give you the impression that when you had the control, you had it. you controlled it. When you set this property, that was the only place that property was set, and you were in that state, and you could do it at any time. Once you had the button, you could do it before you installed the button into the before you added it, after you added it, whatever. It just remembered if it needed to and did whatever work it needed to guarantee that state was what you saw when it got inserted.
Yeah, I remember, spelunking through the VCL and seeing recreate wind.
Yeah.
Going, what?
Oh God, yes.
Yeah.
Because certain window styles, you had no option but to recreate the window handle. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that was true to this day, right? I mean, so if you wanted to change something in the frame or of the window, yep, you have to go recreate.
Yeah, some tricky things is like trying to get that to work with ListBox was tricky because the ListBox had its own state of what the window list was, and if you recreated it, you had to serialize out its state and then re-serialize it back in.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
I remember writing a lot of that code. That was quite involved.
Mhm.
Yeah, the other place we do the recreate window today is on mobile devices, because when you turn your device, you have to recreate everything. And so we're kind of saving the state and reapplying everything. And it's smooth, but it's
The Android development tools, your job is to persist that data when you rotate and recreate everything and then put it back in the controls. And it's like, I like the way Delphi does it. It just recreates it, manages all that for you in the same way the VCL did. One thing I wanted to mention though is that you commented about, you'd originally thought about putting garbage collection in Delphi. So the Delphi compilers, the mobile compilers had garbage collection in them. Well, it was not garbage collection, it was automatic reference counting for the memory.
Yeah, but yeah.
And interestingly, the developers, the feedback predominantly has been that they like being in full control themselves. And so the plan is in the next release actually to have it unified again to be completely user managed instead of having the automatic reference counting for everything. Because, like you said, it's nice to know from a design point of view that you can know that's going to be counted, but our developers say they prefer to control that and have that performance themselves.
I mean, we did have a simple form of memory management with our long strings, right? I mean, and their reference counting, but it was not. I mean, we did think about extending that to more fully, but we kind of also knew that reference counting, you can always leave islands, so you're always going to have some manual memory management, and if ref counting is your mechanism. So, and mark and sweep, and then like true collectors was, I don't think, even on the table at that time. I don't think anyone really did that, at least not in production languages. So yeah. Well, I suppose Java did, shortly thereafter. But then again,
Lisp was the one that was doing it before then. I mean, a lot of the garbage collector work was done with Lisp.
Oh, sure, but yeah.
One of the things I've always liked about Delphi is its explicitness, though. I think that's appealing to a lot of people, that if you create something, you have to make sure it gets freed explicitly, not implicitly.
Yeah, Rust is the most innovative right now when it comes to that, where they're trying to avoid the garbage collector, and they oddly enough, they institute an ownership model that's tracked by the compiler. So when I look at it, I go, wow, okay, we were almost right here.
If I can go back to history again, there's something I was curious about. A few minutes ago, you were talking about taking extra 6 months for the database model, and about a project that I hadn't heard of before, Monet, I think, for visual programming and so forth. I was wondering what the timeline was for Delphi. Because if Turbo Pascal was in about 92, and then Delphi came out in 95, and you had these other projects as well, and you had a 32-bit compiler in parallel as well. What was the story with Delphi? How long did it actually take from whatever point you actually conceived Delphi as Delphi until it came out?
Well, I mean, it goes all the way back. So the original Turbo Pascal was in '83. And then, we went through a long line of Turbo Pascal releases, and then we added Borland Pascal, sort of the fuller product. And that, I think, got us into the early 90s. And then I think after Pascal 7 was sort of the last of those big. And then at that point, you know, GUI was starting to become a real thing. And there was going to be, everyone knew there was going to be this big shift from text mode to GUI. And of course, we had a Turbo Pascal for Windows, which really was just take Turbo Pascal and build some sort of class library, but it wasn't really, but it was really sort of like text mode in you know, on a GUI screen, right? And then, like I talked about earlier, then we had our little detour with the Monet thing, and I think that was that was also like probably around 92, 93, and then I think that's and after we sort of got our heads straight again. So I think we probably started in 93.
Yeah.
I don't know, but that would be.
It was exactly that we ended up going through this Monet project, which was Rick Shell was that was his baby. He wanted us to do something more visual than Visual Basic, and so he's focused on the visual to do it. And when Anders and I were like talking about Monet project at one point, we're in the parking lot just chatting, and he said he had taken Visual Basic home to study it, and he came back the next day and he said, you know, we could just do this in a couple months with what we had, and we had this idea that we could just, and it was pretty true. I mean, we had all the pieces there, but Rick didn't allow us to do it. And it wasn't until he left the company that the day he left the company, we get a new director of development, and Gary and Anders and I go up to him and say, hey, we have this idea for a project. Can we do it? And he said yes. And so we never talked to him again. At least I didn't. I didn't want to change. And so we went ahead and started working on Delphi, what became Delphi. We called it Visual Pascal at the time, but we wanted to, once we got the go ahead, we decided not to rock that boat. And we just heads down.
Yeah. By the way, Delphi, that was our code name. Danny Thorpe came up with that one, as I recall. And then when it was time to name the product, all of the other options were so horrible. I mean, Visual App Builder, and I forget what it was. I mean, it was terrible. And can't we just stick with Delphi?
Yeah.
But the reason the product is called Delphi is because that was the name that sucked the least.
I still have two floppy disks with
because
Wasabi.
we were doing database development, and you know, the database development, or the database at the time, was Oracle, right? So
Yeah.
Exactly.
where do you go to talk to Oracle? Well, of course you go to Delphi.
I said I still have a pair of floppy disks from the original beta that say Wasabi on them.
Yeah, we had several names for the betas depending upon which group we sent it to.
I didn't even remember that one.
Yeah. We ended up having, we were quite overly clever with our naming.
Wow.
Well, I remember in October of '94, Borland invited a bunch of people to come and see Delphi 95.
Mhm.
Yeah, because they changed, that was the kind of what they were going to brand it as, the code name and so forth for the field tests. And you had a bunch of, David, I was there, and you guys were both there, and Charlie Calvert, he was doing a lot of the training about the various pieces.
Mhm.
I got invited, and I had to basically said I need to take time off. I was not going to miss that opportunity. Just because I had started already writing on it, had a chance to meet both of you guys, which was, I was fanboying quite a bit that day. But it was
That day, Ray?
yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Couldn't resist.
But the thing that was so fascinating is that the attendees, you had about a third were old Paradox developers, and they were really concerned about what this was going to do. And then you had a lot of other developers who were coming from other avenues or just straight Turbo Pascal, and everyone was getting excited. But the one thing that everybody rallied on was the name. You know, it's like, 'cause there was at the end, it's like David Ives asking, hey, what should we, we call this? And everybody's just like, just call it Delphi. That is what stuck. So, it was great that it was the least, offensive or, bad name, but it was something that everyone could rally around.
Yeah.
And that's something I really remember from that.
No, it was a good name.
Yeah.
Better than VBK.
Yeah.
So, Anders and Chuck, I know that you've moved on and are working on lots of other things. How much do you keep track of what's going on with Delphi, kind of the legacy you've left behind with this?
Well, Alan Bauer and I have lunch about once a month, and
Okay.
that's kind of what we chat about. Just talking about old times and keeping track of what's happening. He was there for quite a long time after both Anders and I had left. He's now working in the Chrome team at Google, but he and I have lunch about once a month and keep track. We still have friends that are working on the product, so.
Yeah.
All these years later, yeah.
Yeah, I must say I spend less time, because this is like many babies ago now. Because
It's all grown and left the house, yeah.
Yeah. And then, so I've got C# to look after, and then, and then the TypeScript project. And so in between those, yeah. But I still fondly remember that time. It was such a special time. Not just, and it was a special product, but it was also a special time, right? We were at the roots of the industry, right? And this, and it was a small industry back then, and we were just fortunate enough to be there to grow with it, to literally be there from the beginning.
Yeah. We were just doing things we thought made sense. We didn't realize we were defining what people were going to be doing for the next 20 years. So.
Right.
Well, I find it fascinating that so many toolings and products and languages that are coming out now are resurrecting concepts that you guys had from the get-go. I look at Swift, for example. There's a lot of Delphi ideas and concepts in what Apple's done with that language. I think obviously we're aware of, what the .NET framework had in to support Delphi, should it ever, to go into the .NET space, that managed code and all of those things. But just even some of the newer IDEs trying to do more two-way tooling and things like that. It's a way to approach software that made sense and is, longtime Delphi developers we get a little jaded at all these newfangled things coming out, and it's like, hey, we've been doing that for a quarter century.
Yeah, but to be fair, we stood on the shoulders of giants too, right? There were many products that we learned lots of things from, and you'd be foolish not to incorporate that. I often say that like every new programming language is like 10% new and 90% the same, and a lot of people tend to over-rotate on that 10%, and then they do a crappy job of all the menial stuff that you have to have, and so it's.
So I have a question for both Anders and Chuck. Is there anything that you really wanted to add to the product but never had the chance to do so?
Well, I had 10 years to do it, so if I hadn't done it by then, one thing that I didn't seriously want to do that, but every time when we got done with Delphi, we did 1.0. I really wanted to rewrite TurboVision. So
Interesting.
Well,
I wanted a text mode version that we did the development the way we did with Delphi. I think that's every time I do a new framework or something like that, I want to redo all the old ones.
The
Programmers like to rewrite their code. Yeah, it's familiar territory. It's. I left shortly after. I within a year and a half, I left for Microsoft, right? So
yeah.
And we were real busy in that year and a half because we shipped the 16-bit version, and then a year later we shipped the 32-bit version, and And by the time I left, 3.0 was underway. And so we hadn't even started
Packages.
streaming yet. We were just going down the list of all of the things that we didn't get to do that we knew, you know, we desperately needed to do.
Yeah.
So a question I have for both you guys, I think it's a bit moot for Anders because I think most people know what Anders is up to. So what are you up to, Chuck, these days?
Yeah, right now I'm working on a new framework for Android development called Compose. And so we're working with the UI team to unbundle the Android framework from the operating system and taking the opportunity to rewrite it. So I think I tell the people I work with, this is my 8th framework that I've worked on now. So
Wow.
this is
You're at Google, right? Is that right?
yeah, I'm at Google now. I'm working with the Android team and called Jetpack Compose, and we're not quite alpha yet, so we're still in a pre-release.
Mm-hmm.
And what have you been doing, Anders?
Well, so probably the last, it's many years now, the last, when I left Portland, I came to Microsoft, worked for a short time on Java development tools, right? And then C# and .NET. And I did that for over a decade. And then I got interested in this whole JavaScript phenomenon and how, you know, like people were writing these enormous apps in JavaScript with horrible tooling.
Yeah,
And
I was somewhat involved in that. I got Anders interested.
to TypeScript, and then this was also a time of great transformation for Microsoft. You know, going from being a very sort of inwardly focused company to being much more externally focused on customer needs and on open source software. And so TypeScript was one of the first large open source endeavors from the get-go at Microsoft. And we've been going now for, well, we shipped, what is it? Close to, about it's like 7 years, more than 7 years ago, the first release. And we're still going. And so I spend my day writing bunches of code. I would have never dreamt that I'd be writing compilers in JavaScript, but here I am doing it, and they actually work really well, and they're fast. And I mean, JavaScript VMs have come so far; it's astounding how they've gotten. So we're having lots of fun with that. My day-to-day workflow is entirely on GitHub. So that's where I spend my time.
It's fun to read a check-in comment from Anders Hausberg, I will say.
Oh yeah.
It's with Ablum. He changes the world with one comment, one commit.
You know, it's been wonderful actually, because it has allowed me to go back to the roots that I actually had at Borland, back in the time when I worked with Chuck on Turbo Pascal and Delphi, where, you know, the primary focus was writing code. And then, you know, as you sort of ascend into the higher levels, you know, you also often lose touch with what got you there in the first place, you know what I mean? And that was starting to happen to me with C#. I was doing a bunch of design work, but I wasn't actually involved in the day-to-day coding. It was more like strategy and you know what I mean? And I wasn't happy the same way that I used to be. And then I decided, you know, I'm either gonna like stop altogether, or I'm gonna go back to what I really enjoy. And I did, and I'm still at it. So
That's great.
because I am.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It is fun.
There's just something about writing code. I've been programming for, I don't know, 25, 30 years now, and it's still, it just is like magic. You know, when you do something and you run it and it did what you expected it to do, and you're like, it feels like a miracle that happened. You know?
Yeah.
Well, that's because it kind of is, Jim.
It is fun. It is tremendously satisfying, you know, to keep an enormous puzzle in your head and then have it all thought out and just make it work, you know. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but yeah.
I know I was a much better programmer when Anders was looking over my shoulder. He would say things like, "Well, you could do it that way."
That is brilliant.
Do it that way.
Yeah, it's like, okay, what did I
That'll be
do?
nice. No, you're a pretty shrewd programmer, Chuck. I wouldn't.
But I just remember those comments. I was like, well, you could do it that way.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, Anders is never really overt with his criticism. You have to listen for it.
Hmm.
And I got really attuned to it.
Same thing with fake praise. Yeah.
Yeah. But that was amazing when we were working together. It's just we would shift off on both. Both of us were working. Anders focused on the compiler initially, and I focused on the library. And then we just kind of would flow back and forth. I never worked on the compiler, but we'd flow on the IDE and different parts of the VCL. And
Yeah.
he would take over pieces that I did the initial cut on graphics, and he fixed my code, made it work. And then I would do stuff in forms and controls and stuff like that. And we would just, whatever needed to be done, we just went ahead and did it. It was great.
It was a great working relationship. It was. Yeah. It was.
So
We
now,
started keeping track of how many people broke the build, and since it was always me, we stopped keeping track.
Well, QA back then, it's not like we had CI tools and like
No.
test suite or whatever. It was just like, just do it and ship it. And
We did. My funnest times, I think, were when we were like fixing these last minute bugs, where I would go on the machine and I'd be writing code on the machine that we were building the golden release for, changing some script file or some file with 5 people looking over my shoulder while I'm doing it, making sure I didn't type it wrong, and then saying, okay, well, that looks good. Let's cut 1 million of these.
Just a little pressure, not much.
No, not at all. Yeah, it was great.
But being self-hosted, actually, the fact that we were written in ourselves was great, because whenever something broke, we kind of knew it right away.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That was one of the things that you insisted on early, Anders, was that we used our own stuff.
Yeah. No,
And
we're
we-
still. I'm to this day. I'm like TypeScript is written in TypeScript. The C# compiler is written in C#. I mean, it's absolutely. You gotta eat your own dog food.
And the other thing the other thing I remember is just giving us the directive at the beginning is saying, if something crashes, you stop everything and you figure out what happened. And you don't, you fix that thing. So if you run into a problem in the IDE, which was built in Delphi, you just didn't go, oh, well, somebody else is going to take care of that. You had to fix it. And so we stopped and we figured out what the crash was, and then we fixed it, and then we went on.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Quality is job one. Yeah.
I was just having a conversation with someone the other day, yesterday, I think, possibly, about how the world of software development has changed over the years. Like, and you kind of mentioned that, that we didn't have continuous integration and things like that in the past. What do you think as far as the overall idea of software engineering? Where are we headed next on that? What do you think is coming, or how mature is it overall, you think, now?
Well, I think I mean, to me, I think, the astounding transformation that has happened in software because of open source and the way developer communities work now versus the way they worked, say, 10 years ago is tremendous. I mean, they're so, and then of course, like you couple it with the web and the cloud and the phenomena like Stack Overflow and sort of the ability to just get help from anywhere at any time and collaborate with anybody all over the globe in real time has totally transformed the way our industry works. And it has been much more transformative, I think, in a sense, rather than what has happened in programming languages in the same amount of time. Programming languages move very slowly. They're sort of more they're more an expression of what our brains are capable of, and our brains have not evolved all that much in the last 10 years, right? But the hardware we run on has, so we can do more things. But it's the same old ideas, right? I mean, functional programming is 50 years old, if not more, and is only now seeing a sort of a big renaissance, right? And it's interesting, you know, how we have all of these sort of things moving at different velocities that are coupled in an intricate dance there.
I think it's about time to let you guys go. I appreciate you coming and joining us and helping talk about the 25 years, Delphi's 25th birthday.
It's amazing, isn't it? My God.
Yep.
I guess we're all getting older.
Better than the alternative.
There you go.
That is true. That is true. So I guess, you know, it's something to think about, you know, just the fact that, you know, 25 years ago, Delphi came out. I mean, I wouldn't, you know, you think something you make is going to have last, but 25 years seems like quite a while for something to just still be going strong.
It is.
Yep.
It is. It's wonderful.
I remember talking to Gary at one point and saying that once we got the 32-bit compiler, I could see the product lasting at least 10 years.
Yeah.
And Gary goes, yeah, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, we added another like 9 compilers to it, so that's
Yeah.
keeping things moving.
I mean, we were thinking like 10 years would be a long time. 25 years, that's just unimaginable. At this, I mean, I couldn't have imagined at the time that it would last this long. I mean,
Yeah.
people were talking about whether Borland was going to last the next year, let alone 25 years.
Yeah. And
Wow.
honestly, if you look back,
Product did seem to outlast Borland. Yeah.
oh, yeah. but if you look back at 25 years ago, I mean, there are very few software products from the time that are still actively developed, sold, and
Yeah,
used
true.
with large communities like that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's not like a huge community, but it's a significantly large one, and the product is there. I mean, it's whenever we do a release, it's like we take we have all of these version numbers that take back some of them. I mean, the compiler version takes back to Turbo Pascal 1 still. So I think it's 34. I mean, I don't know. I lose count, but yeah, and so the product is still there, and it's unique because I mean, if you look at other products at that time, there's not much left, and it's a testament of the quality and the design that was behind it, for sure.
Yeah. Great foundations.
Okay, well, thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot. It was an honor.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.
Okay, so I thought that was a major treat to be a part of. And actually, I'm in Jakarta, Indonesia right now, and I have Dave Nottage and Zach Briggs from Delphi Mystics here joining me as well. And then I believe, let me double check, Dave Millington is online for Q&A as well. And Marco is going to try and join shortly too. So if you do have any questions, drop them in the question panel. A lot of just exciting stories. This was just such a treat we were going through and reading through all the comments and everybody just cheering for Delphi and saying, hey, I'm excited to see Delphi growing and all that great stuff. So that's really great to see for sure. I do want to, actually I want to share my slides here, or screen again real quick. So we had a couple slides. I was planning to put more of these in here, but just some of the things we wanted to talk about in the thing, which we'll cover probably mostly as well. Just some of the innovations that made Delphi. And it's neat reading this. This is the stuff that was in Delphi 1, and it's still, I think, just incredibly useful and really innovative, I believe, still today. And then what makes it innovative today, of course, we have 9 new compilers. And the neat thing is the 9 compilers came just in the last 9 years.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So Delphi is growing so fast lately, it's crazy. And one project file for every platform. and some of the other great new innovations. Oh, it doesn't, we have all the new language features too. Yes, extended, the language syntax extended with modern features. So again, this reminder is from the festivities, delphi.embarcadero.com. That's where you want to go. So there's a ton of content on there, and there's more coming. We just, the amount of enthusiasm we got from the community and people like Anders and Chuck and others was more than we could get together and put up there that quickly. So do go to delphi.embarcadero.com and go back again later next week possibly, and week after. We're planning to keep it around. I don't know, at least Delphi's gonna be around for another 25 years at least, so it'll be there for that long. And I posted the link in the chat. I'll post it again for the Delphi One client server. You can download that. And just, share your stories on social media or the communities wherever you're involved, and pictures of your, oh gosh, what was it? Someone posted a picture.
It was a receipt.
A receipt. Picture of the receipt from when he bought Delphi. What was his name?
Hang on, I'll find it. Real quick.
Okay.
Take me 2 seconds.
I was going to put that in the thing, but I didn't. He posted a picture of his receipt for buying Delphi.
Randy Tapson.
Randy Tapson. Thank you, Randy, for sharing that if you're on here.
Best $188 ever spent. This receipt is actually from March, looks like March 11, 1995.
Yep, Egghead Stores. I remember Egghead Stores, man. They were the bomb to get your software.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Okay, so let's jump out and see if we have any questions. Oh my goodness, they still keep coming. I'm using Turbo Pascal and Delphi. Developed my main application now since 34 years. Thank you. Oh, yes. So many stories in here like that. It's just great to hear people that, just have built their careers for so many years off this software. And especially someone else was saying that they had a Turbo Pascal project that they were interacting with the Delphi project, right? So they had the old Delphi Turbo Pascal project working with the Delphi project.
Wow. That's testament to the backwards compatibility.
That's such a huge important thing to me. Yes, video stopped. It's over. We will have a replay if you didn't get through all of it, if there was a technical hiccup. Let's see, when is Jetpack Compose going to be incorporated in Delphi? It's not even in alpha yet, so at some point it'll be down there. Oh, hey, there's David I. I'm still programming with Delphi every day. I also wrote my first line of Fortran code over 50 years ago. Wow. Thank you, David, for all you do. David I was incredibly instrumental in getting connected with Chuck and Anders and a number of other people that we have more content coming from as well. So happy birthday from Mexico. This was great. Delphi rocks. Excellent video. Thanks, Delphi. Thanks, great. Thanks, wow. Brilliant video. Well done, guys. Feeling very well nostalgic. I'll tell you what, being in that interview, it was so hard not to just freak out and be in awe the whole time and not be able to form complete sentences. Oh my goodness. So cool. So cool. So great to hear all the birthday wishes from everywhere. Does Delphi run on Linux distros at all? So currently the IDE does not run on Linux distros, but you can get the compilers to run under Wine. So at some point we might see something that can work with that. So yeah. Off topic, Stefan says the Delphi Mystics honored and thanks. Oh, the pleasure's ours. Thank you. Started with Turbo Pascal 3 and stayed with Delphi. I love that session. So awesome to see these people together and to reminisce. It was fantastic. Such a treat. So Delphi felt like a breath of fresh air, especially coming from Visual C++ 4, where I was coming from. Yeah, I mentioned that, right? That I'd been using Turbo Pascal. I'd looked at Visual C++ and VB, and I was just like, none of these are there. And then when I discovered Delphi, I'm like, this is such a huge leap forward. It was just mind-blowing. It still is, in my opinion. Occasionally I'll look at other tools, and there are other tools that come a long way, but I still think Delphi is just leaps and bounds ahead.
You feel like wizard with it, like a magician that you can just like.
Yeah.
Mystic.
It's like a mistake.
Good reference.
Oh, Dave, if you're on there and you want to add anything, David Millington, feel free to unmute yourself.
Sure, I'm online. Thanks, Jim. We've
Yeah.
had a number of questions. I think we're scrolling through several hundred, could be 300 at least.
I know.
Comments and people saying happy birthday, that kind of thing. It's absolutely amazing. I can hear a bit of echo, by the way, Jim. You can move the mic away
Oh,
from
I'm
the speakers,
sorry.
but- Yeah, thanks. We have a huge number of questions as we come in, and many people saying happy birthday and reminiscing about the use of Delphi and that kind of thing, which is absolutely fantastic. There's so many people online, and it's really great to see you all here. There were a couple of questions I can see that I think are worth answering. One person said, who is David M? He didn't say very much. Well, that's me. I'm one of the product managers today, and really it was just a pleasure and honor being part of the call and listening to some of the insight I think that Anders and Chuck had. I think the main thing that I actually asked in the question was about the timeline for Delphi. One particular personal interest of mine is in the phenomenon that you sometimes see where small and productive teams create big and influential things very fast. It doesn't happen very often. We're used to thinking of significant projects taking a long time. If you build a skyscraper today, you expect many years. You might not expect to hear that the Eiffel Tower was built in 2 years for the cost of about 40 million US in today's dollars. Sometimes these things happen. And so I asked a question about the timeline there because my understanding of Delphi's timeline is it was quite short. Something really amazing was built in a short time. There's a question here about so some kind of emulator one can run in a Linux distro for the historical ISO. And yes, look, any virtual machine software should work. Probably VirtualBox is best, but I think there are others that run on Linux. I installed Delphi 1 this week for the birthday. Now I run on a Mac, and so I used VMware Fusion, but any virtual machine should work. You can just install a copy of DOS and then a copy of Windows and then your copy of Delphi, and it should work just fine. I've heard as well that using DOSBox is also good. I run some DOS games and stuff in DOSBox, but I've heard you can run Windows 3.1 successfully as well. And if you can run Windows 3.1, you can install Delphi 1. Let's see, Jim, I took over there for a few minutes. Do you see any other questions?
So there was a comment there that there are links you can find for images of older versions of Windows, like virtual machines. I can't remember who posted that in the chat. So if you scroll back through the question log, you can find those where you can get these to download virtual machines that you can use, apparently. They said they're official Microsoft ones. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just what came through the link. There's a question here for you, though, David. Well, one more thing. David I has a comment here. Special respect to twin separated at birth Charlie Calvert for training the world on Delphi. Yes, absolutely. Charlie is a huge asset, and thank you, Charlie, for this. Hopefully, we'll be able to get with him and talk with him some more about Delphi too. So, but David, there's a question here about possibility of Delphi IDE supporting other languages. Like Spanish or Portuguese. It does have some multi-language support now, right?
Yeah, it does. So currently Delphi or C++ build all of Rad Studio supports English, German, French, and Japanese translations. We are interested in adding others. I think the best thing to do there is just send us an email, send me an email specifically, and let us know what you're interested in. My email is just david.millington@embarcadero.com. For a moment there, Jim, I thought you meant other languages, as in other programming languages.
Yeah, there we go. Other programming languages too. That would be awesome. What do you think? Any chance we could see other programming languages in Rad Studio IDE?
How many do you
I
need?
think we're pretty good with Delphi and CBuilder at the moment, but let's see what happens.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Oh, there's Ray on there. He says, thanks, Jim, for inviting me to participate. Absolutely, Ray. So, Ray, there was a question specifically for you and I didn't send you the link to join the Q&A part ahead of time. I apologize. But the question was if you had plans to update your component development book for FireMonkey and some of the changes that have happened in VCL over the years. So if you want to type your question in there, I will read it out. Oh my goodness. These questions are coming in faster than I can even read them.
Oh yeah, there's a ton of them. It's good to see the enthusiasm.
Yes, that is so great. Says, what about David I? Recently, he must be older than 25 by now. I think David I, yeah, I think he's just over 25. When is 10.4 coming out? They're working on it soon. I don't know. Sometime this year, I think, is the roadmap.
Yeah, roadmap is first half 2020. But we have some good stuff underway for 10.4, and we're following a release when it's done strategy for 10.4. So we'll get it working well, and then we'll be very happy to release it.
So Jaron has just put up a list of some highlights on his blog post, so you can check that out on his blog. It should show up in the chat window there. I think one thing that Delphi facilitated was a large number of software developers to create their own businesses around the software they build in the product. Very financial liberating. That is so true. There are so many ISVs, just small software houses built their software with Delphi. I mean,
yeah,
you guys here as well. I've worked at a number of small, medium, and large companies that were just powered by Delphi and did so much. DBase is still a product. It is. And oh gosh, Michael Roslog, who was a former Delphi product manager, is the product manager for DBase now. Olaf says, here's some evidence of when Jim and I first met for the first time. I was with the A to Z team at the BoreCon 2004 booth. Oh, cool. I'll have to check that picture out later. We are waiting for the LSP version of Delphi. Yes, that'd be great. Ray says, I've written articles and presentations about creating FireMonkey controls, and I do often consider writing a new edition. Challenge is finding the time, but I appreciate the feedback. Would be kind of fun to publish a 25th anniversary edition. Wow, that would be cool. It's hard to believe that it was the 25th anniversary edition of your original component book. Yeah. But you would be. I will be David I says, I'll be 69 years young in June 2020. Yay. Since I jumped the gun, can't get download. Oh, Lars says can't get it to download. I'm sure you will find a place to download it. There are a number of sites that have software archives for old versions of things that you probably could find on, I'm sure. A VCL skin for Delphi 1, Windows 3.1 look would be nice for the B-Day. Yep. Pascal's been used for very secret projects in the 80s and 90s, still in their NDA. I'm sure it has. I heard NASA was using Delphi for a lot of projects internally as well. And I know, I've heard of a lot of projects that. Thanks again, Jim, for, oh, yeah, that's Ray. Does anybody remember Jeff Dentham and his gorgeous book, Complete Turbo Pascal, who taught me programming? Did you ever read any of Jeff's books?
I don't think so.
Yeah. The name sounds familiar. Anyway, Kylix will be relaunched. Well, Dean, we have Delphi. I guess Kylix was a IDE on Linux. That we've talked about that. I don't know. It's not on the roadmap yet to have an IDE on Linux.
You can target Linux though.
You can target Linux though.
You can compile stuff for Linux and just You can't run the IDE on Linux.
Started with Turbo Pascal in college, authored an app for automotive retail, initially in Turbo Pascal 5, then upgraded to Delphi in 1999, reaching 2,500 installs and 60,000 users nationwide with vibrant life for 28 years. Now I have 2 Delphi jobs, one in dairy industry and a second in aviation jet charter. Delphi equals happy life. Fantastic, yeah. Also an IDE for Mac and Linux would be great. Long live Delphi. So one other thing about us is that the Delphi IDE has so many Windows specific things in it. So I think if we were to see a Delphi cross-platform Delphi IDE, it would probably be a light IDE to start with. There will be a replay, so yes, we will have a replay available. There's a couple things I still want to work on editing it. This has been just a lot of work getting this all put together, so I'm going to edit some more.
Sorry to interrupt you, just on that question about a cross-platform IDE. You're right, I think we would start with the light one. We do see people interested every so often, and that's the kind of thing where we'd like to gauge interest. So if you're interested in that, send us an email, get in touch. Over to you.
I'll send you an email, David, because I'm interested. Yeah. Gary says, people ask me why I like Delphi better than Fox Pro 2. I said, Fox Pro is like coding with mittens, and Delphi is like coding with driving gloves. You know, honestly, that's one thing I love about Delphi. It was mentioned in here is that you have this, and I talk about this a lot if you've heard my presentations, but Delphi gives you these incredibly powerful components. I mean, like the FireDAC components are so amazing. You know, you can do so much stuff with just setting some properties on them and such, or like the REST client library where you can actually connect to a REST client, a REST endpoint from the IDE by just setting properties. Yep. You don't have to write any code. And I mean, you could, with FireDAC and REST, you could connect to a REST endpoint, pull the data down, and then pump the data over into a different database, all in the IDE without writing any code. So Delphi gives you this incredible productivity of these components. And then, you know, then you can write some code, you know, and do a lot of amazing stuff. And the one thing I love is, like it was mentioned as well, is because it's all written in Delphi, you can then, anything that happens in the IDE, you can just write yourself. Yep. But then, as if that's not enough, you can still reach down and grab all those platform APIs and pin memory addresses and just all sorts of amazing stuff. So
don't forget the completeness of the tools. You have the turnkey of being able to load rest debug.
Yes.
So you can actually build it out in rest debugger, hit the copy components, and paste them right into your app, and you're good to go.
Yeah. Yep. I'm not sure how many young programmers appreciate how fast the Delphi compilers were and still are. Yes. Back in those days, some C compilers could be measured in tens of minutes to compile things. Or just imagine if you had to like do punch cards or something and send it off and wait for it to come back.
Dave,
really?
That was back in high school. That was
like
decades ago. So.
Actually, Jim, didn't you make a demo testing Delphi Compile Speed recently?
I did. I did make a video.
Code, I think.
Yeah, 1 million lines of code, and it was, oh, gosh, I don't remember how fast it was. It was
4 seconds, I think.
4 seconds. And you know, it could have, it wasn't complicated code. So I'm sure it was very much optimized out, but yeah, it's just a fast compiler. It's amazing. Let's see. When I worked on COBOL programs for the first 3 months, we were not even allowed to type the programs. The code was written on coding sheets. When we did, I had to do that in school. We had to write out our programs long time.
I remember that.
And get a VDU and a keyboard to compile the code. It would take long enough. You could go to lunch. There was a Delphi commercial. I don't know if you saw that Delphi commercial where it was, it's like there's this guy in his office. He's like watering plants and stuff and getting coffee. And it says, you know, many programmers use the time while they're compiling to get things done around the office. And it says the Delphi compiler is so fast. It's not, you know.
It had dead plants, didn't it?
Yeah. It says, we apologize.
Yeah, I remember. I actually vaguely remember that.
And then there's that KCD cartoon
Yes.
that shows the two programmers goofing off and their excuses that they're compiling.
Yep. And that's a much more recent comic, so it's still an issue for some people. Only real compatible. Delphi was way faster than Visual Basic, which was the only real comparable system at the time. Things have moved on nowadays, but Delphi still keeps pushing the envelope on features and speed. Yes, so true. Video stopped. There was a port. Okay, I think okay, let's see. So actually, I was at an XE5 event, I think it was, and we were doing a launch event, and there was a guy there that had written a program in Delphi 1. It did some, solve some sort of particular business problem, and he just had been maintaining that program over the year. Didn't need to add any more features because it still did what it's supposed to do, and he wanted to port it to Android, an Android tablet, and he had the program there, and he pulled it up and ran it, and he'd been buying new versions of Delphi to make sure it worked on, the new OSs and stuff, but it still had the original Windows 3.1 UI. He was using the Windows 3.1 controls and everything, and he said he makes serious money from this, and just, so I was like, well, yeah, you can port that, and I talked to him some ideas about that.
Well, that's that backwards compatibility.
Yeah.
No man left behind.
Oh yeah. Here's some more images for virtual machines. So, how's Frank Borland doing these days? I think he's got programming Delphi again. Also, Delphi and C++ builders also responsible for giving life to more than 250,000 children that would otherwise not have been born. I'm not sure the connection, but I'm sure I'm not sure where your math came from, but I bet it's true. Fertility clinics, yeah, that could be. Yeah,
I used to work for a software company that did software for a fertility clinic.
Yeah, and I actually know people that did software for adoption agencies and stuff too. So, how did you first learn Pascal? I learned it at UCESD using a DEC PDP-11 with 8-inch floppies. I had the advantage because I knew IBM's PL1. How did you first learn Delphi or Pascal?
Pascal. I think it was partly on my dad's Commodore PET. It had I think it might have actually been an interpreter. It didn't work terribly well. I'm just trying to think of what I did next. I think on a CPM machine that I had Turbo Pascal 2.2. So I learned on that as well.
What about you, Zach?
IBM 386, and it was actually Turbo Pascal was the first one I went through, and then I moved on to Delphi. But it was my brother. I was using his university textbooks and trying to impress him. So yeah, that's how I learned.
Yeah, I started programming on a Commodore VIC-20 in BASIC, and then we got a PC. Gosh, it was an XT, I think it was. So 4.7 megahertz. What was that?
It was in the black and white era. It was before my time.
It was an orange and black. And it had the memory chips you had to seat in the board. And I remember upgrading it from 32K to 64K or something. I don't remember.
Do you have electricity back then?
Yeah.
I teased Jim about that.
It was, I started programming in batch files, and I didn't know about Edlin, right? So if you're an old DOS person, Edlin was the thing everybody hated. But I was doing all my programming in batch files using CopyCon, and so if you made a mistake, you rewrote the whole program from scratch. And then my dad got Turbo Pascal, and wow, that was just like a huge step up from batch files in Edlin, let me tell you.
Isn't that like the equivalent of using like on Linux, like the Echo pipe thing?
Yeah, CopyCon, yep.
Yeah, where you're popping it to a file.
Yeah, and I did Echo. I'd echo it and append it to the file too, so I could do that. But you couldn't go back and replace any lines. And then when I discovered Edlin later on, actually, it was wow. Which Edlin was the you could list it and you'd say, I want to edit this line. And you can go back and edit lines or insert lines and stuff like that. Also had a Commodore VIC-20. Yay.
Yeah, I didn't have those.
You didn't have those?
No, my first one that was like mine and, all mine was a 386.
Delphi helps many major broadcasters plan their schedules and do media analytics around the world. So true. I used to work for one of the companies that provided that and found out that like 2 or 3 of the major competitors also use Delphi. Those kinds of vertical markets are just so rife with Delphi applications.
Airport air traffic control.
Yeah.
And Delphi apps.
I wrote a data processing application, Delphi 7, for a government department. And when it crashed during a demo due to a small bug, I fired up the IDE, debugged in front of a room of 100 people for about 2 minutes, got the error recompiled, ran the new XE, it worked. Got a round of applause. That's Delphi. Oh, yes. I could totally see that happening. Yep. I've had a number of programs I've written and then moved on, and then later hear from people that are like, yeah, it's still working. We're still using that. I write in Delphi, but also in Visual Studio. 3 months ago, I helped old fellow that just programmed in D7 and he wanted to make a web app. I taught him to make an interweb app in D7 and he used Paradox with T-tables and it's working. I missed the ASP.NET in Delphi and hope this comes back. We had a lot of conversations about web stuff, so stay tuned. I'm sure we'll have some interesting things. And speaking of interweb, I know I've been talking to Chad and he is working on some great new stuff, new versions of interweb. Catching the tail end, epic beard, Jim. Thank you, Bruce. Actually, I was just debating if I wanted to keep it or not. I don't know.
Well, you got to keep it.
Get a tie-dye shirt, David. I don't know if you have an extra one I can borrow. I mentioned this in the interview. I didn't think about the fact that David also had an amazing beard, but someone pointed out. So
it's a shame he couldn't come down with you.
Yeah. Is there a possibility of a RAD server Lite that can be available as a separate product? Then perhaps Delphi Professional version users could use it. It's an interesting suggestion. Send David an email, and he's product management. He can certainly have conversations about that. Delphi was used for a web app with KBM WADB based, used by the U.S. Army for mapping out the logistics stuff of all the military hardware needed to be shipped to the first Gulf War. Wow. Yeah. I was at a conference. It was a drone conference. And I was doing a talk about my thought controlled drone. And there was a guy there from the Air Force that his CO heard that I was there talking about thought controlled drones and sent him there to learn how to make thought controlled drones for the Air Force.
So, that would have been a cool demo over here.
Yeah. I gave him gave him my source code, so I'm not sure the Air Force may be using my Delphi code now to run thought-controlled drones. I have first met with 8-bit Turbo Pascal 3 on CP/M somewhere in the early 80s. Nice.
Sounds like a similar story to mine.
Yep. From Algeria, happy birthday, Delphi. I love Delphi. Yay. Oh my goodness.
We do too.
We do too. Well, similar competitors are now gone, but Delphi lives. Yeah, Marco mentioned that. And the thing is, there's a lot of, we see like PHP and Ruby and some other programming languages, Java, JavaScript, that are still around and popular. Well, from 1995.
Oh, no, yeah, okay. I thought you were talking about ones that like took from, like concepts from Delphi.
Yeah, but was a lot of other things that were more VB-like from that period that just didn't move forward. And that was the key, I think, with Delphi. Like I said, I keep saying this. It gave you that VB-like productivity, but then gave you all the power. I had a lot of friends that were Delphi developers that worked in Visual Basic shops, and they would be the ones that would make the ActiveX controls for the VB developers to use. Because VB couldn't make the ActiveX controls. And they're always like, we can do all this in Delphi. I'm like, no, we're a VB shop. He's like, no, but you don't need all those VB developers. We can do it. Yeah. Anyway. Wow. A guide for MVC programming directly from Embarcadero. Is it possible? We don't have one directly from Embarcadero, but there are
A couple of them.
there are a couple guides out there, and there's frameworks and stuff for doing exactly that. I have a couple extra tie-dye shirts handed out at BoarCon 2003. You can have one, but they're size M. Oh, I don't think that'll fit me. Thank you, though. I appreciate the offer. Any plans to support BiDi mode for FireMonkey? There actually is a tech partner that supports BiDi mode in FireMonkey. So I can't remember what it's called. If you Google it, I'm sure you can find it, or Bing it, or whatever search engine you want to use if you use a different one. Where is available OpenTools API book for download?
David Hoyle's.
Yeah, you sent me it.
Oh, that's
David,
right.
David Hoyle's got a great reference on his website.
Yeah,
So
davidhoyle.co.uk.
yeah,
You want to check
I'm
that
looking it up right now. Because I used it to develop some stuff.
that's right. I forgot. I remember seeing that.
It's my go-to.
The company I work for has 45 Delphi licenses and millions lines of code produced in the last 20 years. I hope that Delphi never dies. You know, as was pointed out, was it Chuck said that, you know, maybe they said that maybe when Delphi gets 32-bit, it'll last for 10 years. You know, like, oh, I don't know. And now Delphi's got 64-bit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Several
On several platforms.
Yep.
Yeah. It outlived Borland. It's, you know, I guess, I mean, we're still in Embarcadero, but now we're part of Idera, which is exciting. I just don't think Delphi is going anywhere anytime soon. Besides,
So you're working on that quantum compiler, right?
yeah, not going away for sure. A jail in Germany also uses Delphi app for controlling door open visuals.
Sure.
You never know where Delphi knowledge may help you in the future.
Yeah.
Cool. I worked for a company that built software for juvenile justice and detention centers and adult probation and parole that was written in Delphi. First, Turbo Pascal, Memotech, MTX 512, and CPM, and Turbo Pascal 1. At the time, I was into BASIC. My dad did Turbo Pascal, and I didn't buy into the beginnings. There was a series of Turbo Pascal articles in local computing magazine, and my dad said nothing. Since he didn't, naturally, I started experimenting and was sold. Delphi's our company kept a 6-month to 1-year lead over our competitors who were in VB in 1999. You know, Charles, I hear that so many times that people are like, Delphi is our secret weapon. It gets us done quicker.
Yeah.
And you know, with the mobile platforms now, that's even a bigger deal. Not only can you be super productive on one platform, but you can be multiple platforms. Can you tell your story about the Windows app?
Oh,
mobile
absolutely.
thing? This is so cool.
So I've got a client who contracted us to develop a mobile application that integrates with a piece of hardware. And what was happening is every time I would work on the mobile application, I would send them a Windows binary to test it and say, hey, do you like this look and feel? How is the application flow? And they started like asking for them and then taking them into staff meetings and marking them up and sending them back and being like, oh, this is really awesome. We really appreciate it. And then the next thing I know, there's conversations being had about the Windows app that was being developed by another developer possibly going away and just using our Windows compile. And they were asking, you know, what would it take to just make that also our Windows app, you know? And so their salespeople are actually taking this binary out in the field. And they're like, this is what the mobile app looks like. They're showing the customer in like presentation rooms and stuff. But the fact that we could flip a switch and go, here you go, here's the mobile app, and just email it over to them and they could pull it up and be like, hey, this is really cool. I can review this and mark it up. Saved just countless hours and impressed the client like considerably. So much so that it actually added to our contract.
What's David Hoyle's book's name?
It's a website.
Yeah,
So you can actually download
David
it
H.O.
as a PDF, I think. So
it's Delphi Open Tools API book 1.1.
Delphi Open.
If I can interrupt here, it's davidghoyle.co.uk.
Oh,
David G. Hoyle.
on his
Okay.
website.
Oh yeah, there is a little G in there, and that's my bad. I didn't see it.
Okay, so hopefully I typed that in correctly. I love though that with that story that there's like another team developing the Windows,
Yeah.
and you're like, I'm developing the iOS and the Android, and I just outproduced the Windows team on a platform I wasn't even targeting. Yeah.
Oopsie.
First taste of Delphi came from CD-ROM that was bundled with Personal Computer World Magazine UK edition some months in 2000 or 1999. Remember that one? That was Delphi 1. I didn't sleep much for the next 2 weeks. I may have been there too. Was super excited and just trying one example after another and going, wow. I read like every bit of documentation was available. It really helped that I had started my programming on Apple IIe and was fluent in Apple Pascal. Philippe Kahn gave me hand-labeled copies of Turbo Pascal. Why is
Wait,
this
where'd it
keep
go?
doing that? It keeps disappearing. All right.
Where did it go?
I don't know.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I plan on posting this as much as I can on website. So there we do have the it'll be linked to from the yeah, I can't think now.
The blah blah blah.
The blah blah blah. I will post the link here for Delphi
Jim,
1 again.
The question. Sorry,
Go ahead.
the question you're reading out is still on my screen. I think it might have vanished for you, but it was from David I. David I was just saying that Philippe Kahn gave him hand-labeled copies of Turbo Pascal version 1 for CP/M80 and DOS1 at Comdex in 1982. He immediately put the DOS version floppy into his IBM PC in the soft cell Comdex booth and wrote his very first Turbo Pascal app. It was very fast and ran in 33K of memory with the editor runtime and compiler. That's amazing, David. So, sorry, Jim, back over to you.
Oh, thank you. Perfect. Oh, okay. I think we're going to wrap it up. Here's a question, kind of sort of. Does Xamarin create a more native Android app than FireMonkey, or are they equal?
Go for it. I can answer it if you want.
You want to answer?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So we explored this possibility. One of our clients, which I got clearance to admit they're a client, is Parker Hannafin. And when they were evaluating allowing us to use Delphi to write their apps, one of the benefits we were able to cite was the fact that Delphi actually compiles native to the platform versus at the time, I'm assuming this is still true, Xamarin would actually compile and have to run through .NET on the target platform. So you would have a .NET interface, so to speak, on the actual Android or iOS device. And so that allowed us to have advantages. I won't pretend like they're huge performance advantages, but it did make things go easier, especially due to the nature of the project, which I can't disclose that part. But it was definitely worth doing, and I am very glad that we were able to demonstrate to them legitimate and very valid reasons to use Delphi over a different language.
Yeah. So I did one thing is Xamarin. So Xamarin has two options for building the UI. You can use so it's actually kind of weird because you use the Android Studio. Maybe they've changed it by now, but you use Android Studio and Xcode to do the UI portions for each platform separately. And then they recently introduced so you're actually building the UI with the platform specific tools.
Yeah.
But then they reintroduced a new one, Xamarin. blocks. I can't remember what it's called. That's supposed to be a cross-platform solution. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so I went online and tried to find consultants that were specialized in that. And I said, I want you to make a video of this. And everybody I talked to, the ones that said they knew Xamarin, they're like, I would not do that. I said, I know Xamarin, but you wouldn't use it for I mean, they just didn't recommend it. They wanted to do it. They wanted to do it twice. They said they'd rather do it twice, once in Android Studio and once in Xcode than using Xamarin. So I mean, I'm sure some people love Xamarin, but that was quite surprising. So Delphi, but one thing though is, while Delphi doesn't use the Android Studio to build the UI, you can use the components now have platform native render, so you can change the control type to platform instead of styled, and it will replace it with an actual edit box and a couple other ones.
Combo boxes are really handy to do that way because of iOS. They have their way of doing combo boxes, and users kind of expect it that way.
Yeah. So yeah, it works on iOS and Android both.
Yeah.
How did we end up in Jakarta? I took a wrong turn someplace. I don't know what happened.
You took that right turn in Tokyo.
Yeah. So
It's all Zach's fault.
yeah,
That's mine. Sorry.
Zach, so I was in Tokyo for a Delphi 25 event there, and I knew I was going there, and Zach's like, hey, you should come by Jakarta. And I checked the airfare, and the airfare was the same price to fly here as it was to fly straight home. And I was like, well, you know what would be cool is to come down here, and then we could do like some Delphi 25 stuff. And then Dave said, hey, if you guys are there, come on too.
Well, and the part you're leaving out is then I wrapped the whole Rad Studio experience in Jakarta event around it.
Yeah.
So we were doing that for the last 3 days.
Yeah, and we had it was for the first time event. It wasn't huge. We had
It was decent.
decent size, but a lot of the people we had were like, from the big banks or from the stock exchange or whatever. And you were talking to somebody that was like, hey, can I get bulk pricing on licenses?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Which was really awesome.
Yeah. So a lot of interest, a lot of people that had used Delphi before or using Delphi recently, or were just excited to be building mobile apps. So
yeah,
very cool. Skip or kept arc zero-based strings, other such.
Oh wait, hang on. Is that about? I think you can change that with a compiler flag.
Yeah, you can change the zero-based strings with a compiler flag. That's true. And then arc is going away. In 10.4, it's on the roadmap. Limited documentation, world class, most of the doc taught me Delphi. Yes, the great documentation. I was actually looking at some old Delphi books and stuff too recently as well. Okay, I think we're going to call this finished up here. Yep. Okay. All right, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us and for being part of this event. Like I said, we're just getting started. There's more content coming at delphi.embarcadero.com or community.embarcadero.com, or follow or I guess it's community.idera.com/developer-tools. If you go to community.embarcadero.com, it redirects you. Also follow our social media, Twitter, Facebook for Embarcadero Tech, and then, or myself, Jim McKeith, Delphi Mystics at Twitter.
Yeah, Delphi Mystics is the best way to get a hold of myself.
And then Delphi Worlds as well for Dave, and we'll be lots of great stuff. I actually did interviews with these guys, but I've been too busy doing the other interview to get that one posted yet. So
actually, really important. Dave has a Delphi Worlds Slack community, and it's really neat to get all those developers together for that.
So question here, Wilford's asking about Delphi Education Initiative in each country. Go to learndelphi.org, and we're trying to coordinate through there. We all either have a white beard or are bald.
I'm working on both, guys. I'm working on both.
Yeah, me too. My beard's got white spots in it. Yeah, so learndelphi.org is, we're really wanting to push the next generation of Delphi developers. And Delphi is great for learning to program because you can do procedural, you can do object-oriented, you can do whatever you want to do with it. It's very flexible.
3D even. You can
3D.
do you can do 3D environments with it.
Yep, and you can do it on all the platforms. It's just very cool. Does everything. So yeah. People, that's me, and a lot of others like the source to be backwards compatible at times. Yes. Yeah. So yeah. So that's like we're saying, that the removing ARC means that it's consistent across Windows and Android. There are things planned to make it easier to migrate from ARC code-based code to non-ARC code. So make sure you are on it, date subscription, and get on the beta so you can find that as soon as possible. I'm sure there'll be blog posts about it as well. Okay. I could just keep reading through these forever. These are great. So thank you. It's almost an hour, almost an hour's worth of questions. David, anything you want to add? I see you've been here typing questions in the background as I've been sharing stories and stuff.
I have. We've had hundreds and hundreds of comments come in, and I don't think we can ever answer all of them, but it's really great to see. And we'd like to thank everyone who's been online. It was a fantastic interview. I know I really enjoyed listening to Anders and Chuck. Amazing to hear their memories and their insight into development in general. And yep, it's been 50 minutes of answering questions, and it's still coming in. It's fantastic to see everyone online. So thank you all for attending.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you to everybody. And wow. So I just muted myself. Sorry. It's what, 3 o'clock in the morning for me?
Yeah, 3 a.m.
I'm a little loopy. Party must go on. It's a Delphi party. That's right. The best kind of party is a Delphi party, because all your code compiles. It runs on all the platforms. All right. So thank you, everybody. I plan to go out on more social media channels and see some of the great stuff that's been going on. And if you've emailed me in the past few days, I apologize. I haven't emailed everybody back yet. Just so much going on with this. It's great. And I love all the enthusiasm I'm seeing online, people posting pictures and stories and everything. So fantastic. Keep it up. Let's keep this Delphi birthday party going until the 26th birthday. Wouldn't that be great?
Be epic. Whole year worth of celebration.
We probably need to write some code at some point, but
hey, you know what? Here's a way we can celebrate. Everybody that has a new app that they're releasing or an app that they're updating this year, email Embarcadero and let them know, that, hey, we're doing this.
Yeah. So we have the cool apps thing, so you can go and submit your cool app. We were featuring one cool app a week roughly now. It's not a contest because we realized before we just got too many apps, we couldn't pick one. So you can go there and feature your cool app. I'm looking at some other cool things we can do, possibly for ways to feature some great things people are up to as well. So yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And we will see you online with more great Delphi excitement in the near future. Take care, everybody.